Hello and welcome to the Public Sector I Heart You podcast. My name's Matthew Hotten.
And I am Michelle O'Neill from West Midlands Employers.
And now, exciting news, we have a guest.
Hi, I'm Nick Rice from Warwickshire County Council.
And Nick, it's fabulous to have you with us today on our podcast. Be really helpful just to give us a bit of insight into you and what you're doing at Warwickshire. Just give a bit of background.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm currently a development officer at Warwickshire County Council in our Children and Family Service, but I'm also on the LGA's Impact graduate scheme. So I'm sort of doing a couple of things at the same time there.
Fantastic. And we came across you at the West Midlands Employers Tri-Sector Challenge, right? So how was that for you?
Yeah, that was fantastic. It was certainly a new experience and like a challenging day, but I think that was something really, really fantastic for sort of development.
Fantastic. Well, look, we're really happy to have you here. And we're going to be talking a lot, aren't we, Michelle? Particularly in this episode. Coming off the back of one of our other big events, which is the coaching conference. It was a brilliant opportunity for us to recap and talk more about our windmill with the coaches that were in the room. And you also then started to sort of think about what 2040 might look like, didn't you, Michelle? So give us your kind of insight there.
So I think a lot of people say to me, what on earth are you talking about 2040 for? We've got so much going on right now. What's the point of looking that far ahead? Frighteningly, we thought about it earlier. It's actually only sort of 15 years away, which is nothing when you think about what can happen in that time frame. But the importance of 2040 is there is a strong likelihood that our workforce is predominantly going to be made up of millennials, Gen Z, probably taking the helm in some of those leadership roles, and Generation Alpha. And Generation Alpha are those who are sitting in schools right now. Actually, this is the last year when they'll be being born. And we're starting to be talking to Generation Beta, who will start being born next year in 2025, about what their careers might look like in the future. So 2040 is a really pivotal year in terms of that changing demographics. Okay, so what difference does that make right now? What it does is it gives us with that opportunity to start thinking about all those changes that we're making right now to see us through the challenges that we face. We have to be future-proofing them. And what those future generations are bringing with them is that they don't have to adapt to technology like we do. They are coming born into it. It's part of who they are. It's like a seamless integration in everything they do. So what they're going to gift us with is the ability to really start thinking about how we can be transformative, how we can be revolutionary in changing things now that are going to allow us to embrace that kind of new workforce, a new mindset. So that's why it's important that we're thinking about 2040, if I've summarised that.
Yeah, and it was really interesting. Before we started recording this, we were just talking about 2040, and I was working out that I'd be in B&Q eking out some dreadful retirement in my local B&Q store. You'd be on a bus, dressed with your pearls on. Nick, I'm slightly terrified to ask you this question. In 15 years from now, do you mind me asking how old you're going to be?
I'm going to be 40 in 2040.
So you will be 40 in 2040, right? So you're exactly the people that we're talking about, right? So I'd be really interested in your thinking around what do you see for yourself in 15 years? How do you see your career? How are you thinking about that?
Yeah, so I think in terms of 2040, I think it's an interesting one. I think it's actually not helpful and difficult to predict where you're going to be and sort of set yourself on a sort of really specific end goal. I think sort of what I'm motivated by is sort of making that positive impact and finding something that's going to be fulfilling and enjoyable and sort of seeing where that takes me and wherever that is in 2040. It's not possible to predict that and sort of precisely aim there, but I think it's about finding that impact.
But that's really interesting. So, and it's the generational gap, right? So you're Gen Z, you're born in 2000, you're 25 at the minute, you're going to 40. Your whole thinking around your career is different to how it was when I was 25. I'd sat there, I remember sitting down with my dad going, I'm going to be this, and then I'm going to be this. And I kind of had it all mapped. And you'd go into job interviews and people would say, well, what do you want to do in 5 years? And you'd have to know the answer. What you're saying is, actually, it could go anywhere, right?
Absolutely. And I think there's still room in the sector for that. I think sort of you think about roles like public management, you can see the clear progression. But actually, if that's not for you, you've got to sort of jump about a little bit and see what opportunities there are.
Yeah, and this is a lot what we talk about, isn't it, Michelle? As part of our when we talk about talent mobility and purpose, which is what Nick's talking about. How do you see that talent mobility changing over the next 15 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the argument around building a windmill and preempting what's on that real horizon scanning piece, that the mindsets will be very different, expectations will be very different. It doesn't mean we have to park the way we do everything right now. We still have a multi-generational workforce that appreciate different things, but we do have to be factoring in that some of those linear career routes may not be what future workforce wants. And actually, public sector is ripe for that concept of squiggly careers. It's got so many opportunities, so many different areas of the business in order for people to gain lots of different experiences. And I know, Nick, you were saying early on that your graduate placement allows you to do some of that kind of rotations. It's a bit like in the NHS, isn't it? You know, if you're joining as a trainee doctor, you'll get those rotations around the business to really understand where your energies sit, where you've got the most enjoyment, so you can make some of those decisions. Now, if we can replicate some of that thinking, that's going to aid our talent mobility. And if we place that on the challenges we're facing right now, we're probably looking at how we reconsider some of our operating models. We may be thinking about how we may need to restructure, re-engineer parts of our organisations. That's a prime opportunity for us to kind of look at it in a slightly different lens and think about, yes, it's a challenge. Yes, it's something difficult we have to face, but actually seeing the opportunities of where we can be moving talent around the organisation, finding pockets of talent that perhaps have remained hidden until now, and thinking about how do we then maintain that movement. We did so brilliantly during COVID in terms of redeployment, yet it seemed to be the only time where we did it well, and we did it quickly, and we didn't have any issue with it. So how do we start laying that lens over things? How do we start creating those opportunities to move about, not taking away the linear career routes, but giving that ability to move what we class as talent? And what I mean by talent is everybody's unique abilities, not somebody who necessarily stands out above somebody else, but finding the best in everyone and making sure that person is able to perform to the best of their abilities whilst keeping them motivated and engaged in a way that means they can make that impact that you were suggesting, Nick. You know, so that's why I'm trying to make those dots between understanding what that future looks like, understanding what the mindsets are likely to be there, and start bringing that into our thinking now with the challenges we're facing now, so that we're not having to make changes again in 3 years' time, in 10 years' time. We're all ready and equipped to start moving in that direction. And our Gen Z, sorry, I have to say, somebody like yourself, Nick, you're a prime part of our workforce that can help start bridging that thinking. You know, you'll have an understanding and appreciation of what some of those future generations might need and might want, but you'll also have an appreciation and respect for those who are already in the workplace and how they do things and how we can start aligning the two together. So I think making the max out of our Gen Zers in the workplace is a really great place to start.
And I think that the idea of the opportunity and the mobility is something really interesting. And I think one of the things I've noticed and really value is sort of that culture of sort of high support, high challenge.
Yeah.
And when you're given those new opportunities, sort of have that trust to be challenged, but also have that support there and sort of working with people. I think that's where sort of your talent learn best and where you're going to get the most out of those opportunities.
And also, I think it gives you a much more rounded understanding of the organisation you're a part of, right? You know you're right, Michelle. There is that requirement sometimes for that linear progression, but having the ability to move around an organisation, I think when you start thinking about how your leadership will evolve and develop, assuming that you continue on your trajectory, you could very well be a senior leader in the public sector in 15 years from now. You'll have a much richer understanding of the organisation because you'd have moved around it, right?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
I think that
and
gives
you
an insight.
can. There's so much to learn from all across an organisation. I think they are really beneficial.
And how do you feel about that multi-generational bit? I'll be really interested to know, sort of, because you are, depressingly young. But you're working with, we know this in the public sector, we talk about this, Michelle, an aging workforce. What's your kind of experience of that?
So I think it's a really positive one. I think there might be a sort of over perception of how much generations can clash, and I can't speak for all people in my generation, but I think there's misconceptions about sort of how we want to work and how we sort of get the best out of our working lives. I think one of the things that I've noticed is sort of the value of being in the office and face-to-face opportunities. And I think it's one of the big things that organizations can think about in terms of how you build relationships amongst your teams, amongst your generations, getting people into the office and sort of, where appropriate, making the most of that.
And that's really interesting, because I think sometimes there's a perception is that, and I'm going to call you young people. So help me out here. Is that the right way? How do we refer to you?
That's
young
fine.
person, young adult? I mean, what are you, Nick?
Young people's fine.
Right. So but we have this perception that young people want the flexibility to work in a McDonald's or a train station or wherever. But actually what you're saying is you like being in a building with other people.
I think absolutely. I think the value you get out of forming those relationships is just massively beneficial. I think sort of when you're solving problems and working through challenges with your team, I think it's so much better being in person and getting the value out of that.
That's really interesting. It's good. And you talk about challenge. And I know, Michelle, something that you've been thinking about is the social care is facing unprecedented challenge right now. With finances, funding, all of that sort of stuff, people, attraction. You're thinking about how AI might be able to help there. I'd be really interested for you to sort of just expand on that and give us your take on that.
Well, I think we'd be really naive to think that tech isn't going to play a fairly big part in some of the solutions to our biggest challenges. If we're facing major financial constraints, which we are, we can't just buy more. We can't just invest in more capacity. We have to be thinking about how can we increase the pace at which we can work. How can we streamline some of the things that are fairly repetitive? How can we enhance the volume of data and insight that we have without extra people? Now, I'm not talking about replacing people, but I am talking about how do we blend it together cleverly with our human part of our workforce so that we're delivering some really impactful results. That AI tech piece has to be part of those conversations. They're calling it cognitive choreography. How do we bring together and weave nicely kind of human insight and artificial analysis together to bring out data that we wouldn't be able to have otherwise? And I think social care is an obvious place for people to be thinking about it, actively thinking about it, because they are facing such unprecedented demand. They've got huge financial pressures. And as a result of the two of those combined, then they've got massive impact in terms of recruitment and retention. And that is a really valuable service to our local community. So we have to be thinking cleverly about how can AI support us not only as services and as organisations, but as individuals. How can we be using this ethically, wisely, but intentionally? Let's not ignore it. Let's not pretend it's not happening. A lot of people talk about this revolution of technology. I don't believe it's a revolution of technology. I believe it's a revolution for us. This is about how we see things. This is how we think about things. This is about how we construct roles, how we construct the way in which we learn and behave, the way in which we operate. This is how we need to be rethinking, and tech has to be part of that conversation, front and centre. And I think if we grasp hold of it, we'll harness it in a way that feels right for us. We'll use it in a way that is appropriate and reflective of the people that we're serving. If we don't, this stuff isn't going to disappear into the background. And what we'll find is that individuals within our organisations will start using it, and we won't necessarily feel like we are operating safely because people are doing it anyway. And our service users, our customers, however we refer to them, they'll be using it and they'll be expecting it. And then, like I said, when we look at that 2040 horizon, Generation Alpha born alongside the first iPad, Generation Beta being born straight into AI, it is not a tool. It is how they express their identity. It's how they connect globally in the world. It's how they move between gaming platforms, social worlds, learning spaces. How are we going to make sure that work and experience in services is tagged onto that. So it just feels natural for them. And I'm not saying that what they're expecting is to work in an IT role. They'll just be expecting it to be part and parcel of every day. I mean, I think I shared at the coaching conference, didn't I? You could imagine right now a typical 12-year-old gets home from school and before dinner has probably been in a group chat on Snapchat, edited a video to go on TikTok, perhaps been part of a global Minecraft project. And that's all before they've had their dinner, you know. So we've really got to start thinking about how do we use it in a way that's going to help us. And I think if we want to test bed that anywhere, social care is a really good space, because actually it's going to present us with the tough questions about data, confidentiality, sensibilities,
the ethics of it as well,
the
I think, to a
ethics of
degree,
it.
right?
Yeah, so there's a good place to start. And the conversations I've been having with kind of principal social workers is they're actually curious and keen. I mean, you're working in children's, Nick. I don't know how you feel about it, but there seems to be a lot of curiosity. So let's pounce on that curiosity and let's help our staff, our current workforce, help shape how we use it, how we integrate it, so they feel part of the change. And actually we are naturally and gradually then starting to shift the way we operate without it feeling like this major organisational change that they're being told to embrace.
And we're not gonna ask you to speak on behalf of Warwickshire County Council. That'd be really unfair. But give us your insight as how you understand Warwickshire thinking about AI and you yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
How are you starting to use it? You know, is this like old hat to you? You've been using it for years.
Michelle, I think it's a really interesting point, and sort of how we can use it to enhance what we're doing rather than replace. So we were thinking about how we can use it across children and families, and thinking about how it can enhance the work our social workers are doing rather than replacing. And when we're considering the options, we're really looking at how it's enhanced.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the key for me, Nick, or from what you've just said, is that we encourage people in a safe way to be experimental. The only way we're going to start shifting mindsets in this space is not to stick somebody on a course and say, this is how you do it, but allow them to figure out a way in which it's going to work for them. And that might mean giving some permissions to do things that maybe slightly more personal. So using a chat GPT to do a bit of research on a new particular topic, just anything that allows people to go, goodness me, I didn't know it did that. Look at what it could be doing there. And then for teams to be coming together and going, did you know about this? And what about if we tried it here? And these technologies, the kind of Gen AI technologies, don't have to be overly expensive. There are lots of tools out there that you can exploit the freeness of them at the moment, and to do that experimentation piece. So you're then actively making informed decisions about how you want to take it forward. But fundamentally, AI tech is right at the heart of thinking about how we look at our future operating models, how we work together in the future, and how we drive up performance within kind of the financial challenges that we face. But because our service users and our future workforce are going to expect it of us.
I guess I want to just move it on slightly, and because I'm really interested in the leadership piece and how that's going to look down the track. And Nick, we'll come to you in a minute because I'll be really interested to know how you're thinking about that. But Michelle, where's your head at when it comes to this, leadership and how that's going to look and how different that will be in 2040?
This is where I get really quite excited around the leadership
You can just tell by looking at you. You got that.
If we just go off the back of what we've just been talking about, leading in an AI era has got to be a skill. It's got to be a capability, and it's got to be from the very top. But I think when we talk about leadership development, we've got this perception that it's a program you've got to go on, and therefore it's for people who don't have leadership experience.
Yeah, no.
What I'm talking about when we're thinking about leadership development is how do we keep our skill sets future-proofed? How do we make sure that we take all that we know about being a great leader and leading an organisation and keep it moving forward to meet the kind of changing times? And you've been sharing that example, haven't you? Just tell me a little bit about the analogy we're using to help people kind of get our mindset.
I always talk about operating systems, right? And it's, we each of us have got an operating system, and leadership for me is all about that. It's always iterative. There's always something new coming along, and you've got choices. You can either stay where you are and get stuck at a certain operating system and your functionality degrade, or you can be constantly challenging yourself to be the best leader you can be. And that means learning. That means experiencing different stuff. That means not sitting there going, thank you, I've reached my level, I'm quite happy.
I think what's really, really critical is this isn't just about young people learning. This is about everybody across the organisation.
Absolutely.
And I mean at the top.
Yeah.
You know, what if you were using your kind of operating model on a phone approach, what apps do you not have in your app store right now that you need to get? We can be really creative about how we learn. We can be really creative about how we unlearn, which actually over the next few years is going to be equally as critical, because I think we need to come at this with a completely fresh lens, be really bold, stop doing some stuff and start doing some new stuff.
And you're right. It doesn't need to be big programs. It's small things. It's just, it is that iteration. If you get frozen at a certain point, then you become less effective. And you're exactly right. That applies to anybody everywhere.
I think we've got an issue if people think they haven't got something to learn.
Yeah, that's a real issue.
And if we're thinking about 2040, that's the time to be thinking about, okay, what apps do I need in my store in order to support that workforce? And if you're a senior leader right now who may not think they're going to be in their career at 2040, it's thinking about, okay, what legacy do I want to leave? What mark do I want to have made in order for this organisation to be successful now and in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and Matt, I think the learning piece is really important. At Warwickshire, we're really lucky. We get lots of opportunities. So I'm learning a lot through mentoring. So we have mentoring with the strategic director and the chief exec. And we get lots of opportunities such as the Tri-Sector Challenge and Young Local Authority of the Year, which have both been really good opportunities to sort of step out your comfort zone and sort of step away from a day job and sort of refocus on that development piece. And I think it's all about continuing to be curious. I think as someone young in the workforce, I feel a sense of responsibility to bring that energy and bring that curiosity to the team and to the challenges we're facing. I think it's for current leaders to really facilitate that and make sure that the younger workforce have the opportunities to be curious, ask those why questions, sort of probe some of the ways of working and really make their impact.
Yeah, and I love that curiosity that you talk about, Nick. For me, it's how you keep that curiosity going. And I wonder sometimes whether, people get to a point and they just stop asking those why questions, and they stop being curious about stuff. And that's when you start getting the dystopian future of how things might look in 2040, and it could be really bleak. Well, actually, I don't think it's going to be like that at all, do you?
You did that dystopian description at the coaching conference, and I think that really gripped everybody. But this idea that when we talk about AI and tech, it's something we need to be fearful of because it's going to take over. So interestingly, I went and asked AI whether it plans on taking over, and I'm just going to read you a little snippet of what it said. I'll say it, but it was actually Claude for anybody who's interested. I think there's sometimes a tendency to either overhype or undervalue AI's role. The reality is that I'm a tool, albeit a sophisticated one, that works best when guided by human expertise and values. I don't bear the weight of real-world consequences that public servants face daily when making decisions that affect people's lives. I am a robot. You are not, and that's exactly why we need you.
Well, that seems like a really appropriate place to finish this episode. Nick, thank you so much for coming along today. It's been really lovely to meet you.
Thank you very much for having me.
And listen, I hope you enjoy this episode, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.